what we're focusing on today for this discussion is the design for new communal bathing environments, highlighting cultural practices, and we want to know how we can build upon the rich traditions of the past in light of the key issues that confront us today. And I think that the rich architectures and cultures that are devoted to this program of regeneration, pleasure, and connection are ready to be reimagined and re-examined, in 2020. And all of the people here on this panel are actively doing that work of reimagination and reframing of public space through a kind of an aquatic commons in unique and very different ways. The kind of project of reconnection with senses and reconnection with community is going to take on an even larger importance after the pandemic, when people are going to have a great hunger to reestablish, their social lives, their outdoor lives, and what kind of new societies and new cultural formations we might make after the pandemic are on everybody's mind. I think they're definitely on my mind. And this ability to form community and form connection is something that public bathing cultures are excellent at. They've always done, and they've always served as testing spaces for new ideas, cultural ideas, ways of being together, ways of designing, and ways of imagining public life. For that reason, I think they're super important for all of us today. In our audience, we have some students from the University of Waterloo who are actively studying and trying to create designs for new spaces of communal bathing. And their final project for a year-round accessible public bathing space is generating some of the questions that I'm bringing up. So I'm bringing questions here that are coming from a whole bunch of students, and I'll be cycling through them after we do our presentations. And their challenge, I think, is somewhat all of our challenge in terms of creating a space of total regeneration as defined by the inspiring writer and architectural historian Siegfried Gideon, who saw these lineages of development of public bathing as regenerative, not just for individuals, but for whole societies, whole cultures. So these students have been studying diverse forms of bathing cultures like sauna and mikvah and hammam, swimming pools. And they've also been looking at some examples of amazing architecture designed by some of the people who we have here today, including Marcos from Basalt in Iceland, Aziza Choni's work in Morocco. These have formed some of their concrete studies and writings, some of the writings and art projects that we have here by Pia Lindman, Mikhail Allen, all of the people who are here have contributed to the studio and to the work that the students are doing now. And so to present our guests, I'm going to go in a kind of a random order. On the poster, we have first Mikhail Allen, who is a sweat bathing guru, whose classic book, Sweat, has inspired people around the world for decades. And since Sweat has been in the world, everybody I know has been wanting more editions of this book. It is hard to get a hold of Sweat, but luckily Mikhail has made the content of his book available online. So for those of you who don't have a copy of Sweat, which is one of the first surveys of global traditions in sweat bathing, you can find it on his website. And Mikhail is also working on a documentary series right now called The Perfect Sweat, which will share some of the culture from all around the world with people wherever you are. We also have Katie Brocker, who is a sauna master and the co-founder of the British Sauna Society. Katie has created numerous projects in the UK at the intersection of art, architecture, and bathing, participating in the Brighton Beach Box, the Brighton Beach Box saunas as a co-founder of this experimental bathing space in Brighton, recently opened, and also seminal in some more pop-up temporary projects, such as the Barking Bathhouse, which maybe some of you know, especially if you're in architecture school. Pia Lindman is also an artist, an educator, and deeply involved in traditions of the sauna and how it resonates with different cultural groups around the world. Pia created the Public Sauna Project at PS1 in New York City, and has written extensively about this project, amongst many other sauna-based, body-based investigations in her artwork. And she's going to share some of her more recent projects with us. Aziza Choni is an architect and founder of Aziza Choni Projects, and also assistant professor at the University of Toronto's School of Architecture, Daniels. Aziza's project for Sidi Harazem Springs in Morocco is a hugely influential project for students, researchers, and global development minded people, everywhere. And hopefully Aziza will share some of this work with us today, as well as the other many exciting things that she has done globally. Yuma Shinohara comes to us from Basel, Switzerland, where he's the co-curator at the Swiss Architecture Museum. And he is a prolific writer and curator of exhibitions. The Swim City exhibition last year at the Swiss Architecture Museum and its catalog have been very influential to my project here and open up new ways of looking at architecture, landscape, and city spaces as dynamic, aquatic, public spaces. Hopefully you have the chance to see the Swim City catalog and versions of it online, even though it's closed right now. He's also a co-author of Together, the New Architecture of the Collective, and City of Industry. Marcos Sotes, finally, we have here from Iceland. Marcos Sotes is a partner in Basalt Architects. Basalt Architects has created some of the most inspiring contemporary bathing architectures, challenging, I would say, a lot of paradigms in terms of what the limits of architecture might be, architect's responsibility, expanding into geotechnical and geothermal, material, technical, and poetic dimensions. And when I discovered that Mark is also an artist, a multimedia artist, and an exhibition designer with a project called Unstable, investigating the intersection between art and architecture, it was no surprise to me. Of course, I found your architecture first, your wonderful projects such as the Blue Lagoon Interpretation Center and Hotel, Lava Center, and GOC Thermal Baths are some of the projects that hopefully he can share with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to our presenters, and we'll start with Mikhail, and each presenter is going to share some of their work. I'm going to turn on my audio. And for Mikhail, would you like me to?
Okay, so you've turned off your audio, so I can't hear what you're saying, Christy, but can you hear?
Okay, I'm going to try and open.
Christy?
Yeah.
You don't need to do that. Let me just give an introduction.
Don't need to do it? Okay.
Yeah. No worries. I just want to thank you, first of all, Christy, for organizing this and for your amazing book that you've recently published. It's a work of beauty, and I just congratulate you so from my heart that you went through all that work, 10 years at least of work to make that book. I also just want to say hi to all the people out there, many of whom I know. This is a representation of a great community, bathing community. And this ability now for us to come together in this way is such a treat for me, because when I started out back in the 70s, when I was very young, on this quest, this journey, there was not an easy way to connect and to get together like we are right here today. So this is so special and so important that we're all working, putting our minds together in this way to deal with a really big issue. And of course, I'm talking about bathing in general, but also the post-pandemic world that we will inherit very soon, and how bathing will fit into that. So it's very important to me that we're all together, hearing what everybody has to say, all ways to make this all work. It's really going to be a big job. There's a lot of noise going on. Somebody's got their mic on. Turn that off. Okay. I want to acknowledge the people that came before me. I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people. And Christy has mentioned Gideon as one of my heroes. His Mechanization Takes Command, the book that he wrote. There's many people. When I was working in the 70s, I got to know them through libraries and through books. I didn't have the luxury of doing what we're doing now, which is actually seeing some of my favorite people right here in front of me. So they lived in my head. I have a stack of books behind me. This is just a small stack of some of the books that I used for my research for Sweat. And these are people that I would actually have conversations with. Some of them were, most of them had already passed on. But we're inheriting, all of us in this room, this kind of virtual room, we're inheriting work from way back from many people. And I just want you to know that we're all part of this continuum to make bathing something that's really connected and special in this time. It's always been something special throughout history. But right now, it's especially even more important than it's ever been that we come together and work the way we are now. So I just want to say that I'm very happy to be here. I'm so happy to be with all of you. I think we have some really interesting things to talk about today. But I especially look forward to hearing what people have to say about how we're going to move forward with this really, really important mission that we're on, which is to bring bathing culture to the world. Thanks, Christy. Okay. You have to unmute now.
Now I'm off mute. Katie.
Okay, and I'm going to mute.
You hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. So hello everyone, it's lovely to see all of you, and I'm Katie Bracia, the co-founder of British Sauna Society and Beachbox Sauna Spa in Brighton. And I came to bathing late on in life, like many people in the UK who haven't had the the culture there. We had a culture 150 years ago of public bathhouses. Those have died out in the 20th century. So I knew nothing. I'm going to come in and try and share my screen now. So, ooh. Okay, guys, I hope you can see this.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So, my seminal moment in my bathing life was at a festival. So one of these sort of beautiful naked hippie zones with a yurt sauna, and I got naked and saunaed and jumped in a lake and was completely reborn. And that was the moment where I was like, holy shit, we'd been in the sauna, people had been singing. It was just a beautiful experience. So that was the moment where I realized, sauna was for me. I went back to London where I was living and found many versions of this, a sort of kind of crappy box in a gym and a leisure centre. The closest thing that I came to in terms of sort of real public bathing was this bathhouse called Dr. Steam Baths in East London, and it was really like, I imagine like the last of the public bathhouses, and people from all over the world schmising, whacking each other with leaves, which is what I thought it was at the time, covering themselves in coffee, sharing oranges, rubbing lime on their armpits. I mean, all sorts of things. And, it was really eye-opening for me. And in 2012, and that was it until 2012, when my local town centre, as part of the Olympic project, had a pop-up spa, and it was just an absolute joy because it was a wood-fired sauna. It was really nicely designed by Something & Sons, and it was run by a woman called Rochelle Moulay, who was come from a 5-star spa background. So it kind of had all these different elements of community, but good design, and also like really sort of nourishing, welcoming experience. And yeah, so that was when I started really jumping in and getting involved. And you know, as my hobby of being into bathing grew, I also, you know, and being involved with the bathhouse, people were drawn to it. So I met, for example, Mika Meckinson, who we had the idea at the time for starting the British Sauna Society, and I jumped on that and met a young woman called Josie from Canada, and we made a really fun little video about the you know, UK's London sweat bathing scene at the time, which actually I'll share the link with you guys because it's only 4 minutes and it's a nice video. And this was the sauna. It was actually a bit of a rubbish sauna. It was all the seats are too low and the stove's not big enough for the room, but nevertheless we were there. There was people, you know, people together, sharing the space and, you know, communing. And there was another exhibition that I attended, and it was called Steam, Soak and Dream, and it was curated by Jane Withers in London, and it featured the bathhouse, but also various other sort of public bathing spaces. And I think that was when, like, a sort of spark of, you know, the wider issue and the wider aim that we're all talking about now became apparent. I'd also discovered, of course, Mikhail's website, and I spoke, and, you know, having met Mika from Finland, and Josie was studying with the International Bath Academy in Lithuania. So I felt like I'd made this massive discovery, like bathing and its history. I know you guys know it all, but there's a lot of people that don't. And through the British Sauna Society, as it was growing, I was offered a job working with or at the South Bank Centre. And this is a pop-up Finnish sauna. And my job there was working in the sauna, teaching guests about how to sauna. And it was like, you know, a bit of history about the Finnish sauna. It was a bit about etiquette. And a lot of it was just about telling people that it's actually okay to throw water on the rocks. And here's how you do it. Don't hold your hand over the rocks because you'll burn it. And but it was absolutely wildly popular, fully booked all the time, and everyone was having such a fantastic experience. I also realised I could say things on repeat, you know, talking about sauna over and over again, when I knew that it was, you know, bringing something to people was fantastic. And so we came up with Warmth on Brighton. Now, Warmth is a Arts Council funded sauna. So Bethany Wells set this up, and so she got Arts Council funding, and we borrowed it and put it on Brighton Beach as part of the Fringe Festival, another Finnish sauna experience. Of course, it was inspired by the South Bank Centre, and people went wild for it. They absolutely were having the time of their lives. With, you know, constantly full of people, and they were just so joyous. You know, all the things that everyone knows, and they've had a really decent. Basically, people had not had really good sauna experiences, and it was so easy in a way to bring people joy, and that was just something that, you know, couldn't stop doing. And so my business partner, who's in this photo here, Liz Watson, and I, we started Beach Box Brighton, which is a sauna spa on the beach. This is the one of our horse trailers that we've converted into a sauna, and this is one view. You can see it there on the beach, and we've got showers and plunge pools and fires and the sea not very far away. And this is our big banya sauna. Although when I designed it, I tried to incorporate a bit of bench for whisking and enough space to do aufguss as well. So it's kind of like a multifunctional space. And we've welcomed bath masters. This is the Lowly Masters from Belgium, who's teaching us the art of the Alphabet ritual. We've had, this is Bracia, with all of us girls who learnt the art of whisking in the Lithuanian style from the International Bath Academy. And what have we got here? Oh, this is a British Sauna Society meetup. We've just had thousands of guests in. Over and over again, people have absolutely loved it. We've had Swedish events. There's a Swedish crayfish party. We had a Finnish midsummer party. So what we've done is we've created this space and given people really quality experiences. We're kind of educating everyone. So everyone that comes through gets a little bit of talking about sauna etiquette, and we talk a bit about all the different sauna cultures that we offer, and we kind of sell leaves and we show people how to do things. So there's a kind of educational element. And here it is, our spa on the beach. And now there's been a number of pop-ups appearing, like very similar to what we've done with trailers and pop-up spas that are sort of appearing all across the UK. So there's really, I think, a kind of growing momentum. The British Sauna Society is actually formalising into a full organisation now. Let me stop sharing.
Great. Thanks, Katie.
So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. It's very exciting, and I think we've got an opportunity to kind of, create something for for us, for the UK.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm gonna share for you, Pia, okay? And if you can turn your audio on.
Yes. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for organizing this, Christy. This is amazing. I'm really, wow. So many people getting together for sauna. And of course, Mikhail, I have to say that when I was writing my thesis on the sauna bathing practices, when I found your piece, your book online, I hit the jackpot. So I quote you a lot. And also, Katie, I'm gonna just refer to your presentation for a minute. There's a bathtub outside. What I love the project, and I love the project specifically because it is so, whatever is there because you need to have it there. It's you're just sort of putting stuff there. You need a bathtub, so you put it out there, and you're sitting on the beach. You go into the bathtub. It reminds me of my granddad, who used to have a bathtub in the middle of the field, quite far from the house and the sauna and everything. And he would take a bath in that bathtub every day, also when it was winter. So actually, and that now brings me back to the sauna bathing practices. So I'm born and bred in Finland. My mother's side is from Karelia, so my granddad came from the Ibori, and so all of these traditions are very, very every day. They've been there all my life, and one of the things is that exactly it's not only the sauna itself; it's the water. It's the cold water, and I'm also thinking about it's the body of water. The experience, like a friend of mine who's an anthropologist, Tina Gretarsdottir from Iceland, we are now working together on a project called Chill Survive, where we are trying to map the experience of living in the Arctic during climate change. I took her to Kuusamo, which is a small town in southern Lapland, and we went to sauna bathe with my friend. She, of course, has a sauna by the lake, and it's a swampy lake up in the north. And even though Tina has studied this, and Tina has a lot of experience about bathing cultures, and she's been to sauna before. I've had her sauna bathe before, but this was the first time she was in a sauna, so that you go out and you jump into the lake. I lost everybody suddenly. Are you there? Okay, good. So, and not only that you jump into the lake, but you jump into a lake that is just this particular body of water that is swampy, that has all the growth around it. She came back from that experience and said that now she finally understands what it is that you Finnish people are doing. So again, okay, I try to not sound purist. Okay, I really, really think that it's fantastic and it's important that there are different kinds of cultures. And the way that I grew up in a Finnish bathing practice tradition is, of course, because it's so close to me. It's only after I was 30 when I moved to the United States and I went to a spa for the first time in the States, and they had a sauna there, and they had built a sauna with a glass door, so you could see out of the sauna, but you could also see into the sauna. And I was really struck by how every single, and it was a women's only spa, every single woman was really, really uncomfortable being naked. And it manifested itself in these ways of trying to sort of wrap yourself in a towel and then get rid of your clothes and then put on something else, and really kind of this constant sort of difficulty of being a body in a sweat room, you know. And so I realized that that was the moment when I realized that, ooh, first of all, there's a gaze here, and it's a multiple gaze. There are, even though there are no men here, there's a certain kind of male gaze present. And then there's this gaze between women. I actually started asking questions of women in the sauna, like what do you feel, and somebody told me that it's even worse to be just women in the sauna, because with a man you can always play the sex card, but when you're just women among women, then you get the most critical gaze. So there were this, for me, it was like this whole thing about gaze was just such a new thing. I never had to think about it. And that's what then got me onto this project of building saunas and trying to think about the practices and trying to think about how can you actually translate this experience to somebody who comes from a different culture where the relationship to the body is so different. Right now, it's 20 years since I did this, so it's not, my issues are not quite the same anymore, but I definitely work with the body continuously. And maybe in terms of the sauna, there are a couple of, I don't know if it's because of this book, but I've suddenly gotten some phone calls and people would like to have me redo the sauna in one way or another. And potentially exactly this idea that how do you redo the sauna in the moment of this pandemic, which I do find as a very interesting challenge. I can get to that later, but what I also want to add to this project now is that since I am working on these Arctic experiences, I just 2 or 3 days ago, I made an interview with Lena Larva, who is a gynecologist and who has created this concept of Suoma, which is swamp earth. And it's a sauna bathing with peat. And so this is something that she has developed over, 20 years, I guess. And I'm talking about this because there is there's this part about the sauna bathing and any kind of bathing, and also any kind of space, that I think is important. And then that is to take into account what else is living in that space. So depending on what materials you use, depending on how you are in that, what kind of practices you have in that space, you will have different kinds of microbial lives. And these actually do affect a lot how people live, how people interact, how they feel about each other, about themselves and their bodies. And if you can show that one picture from Sao Paulo. So this was the most recent project that I did that has to do with this kind of questions of space and healing and microbes. And it's a mud hut. It was built for the, that's not the image. That looks kind of nice though. Sao Paulo Biennale 2016, I was going there to give treatments. I'm also studying this traditional ancient Finnish healing technique, bone setting technique. And in order to be able to give those treatments, I needed to build feel good and where it's good to heal. And so I collaborated with local craftsmen who are specialized in paua pike, which is a technique of building with bamboo and mud. And the point with the mud is that it contains a particular kind of microbe, which is called something Mycolium vaccae, so the cow dung's bacteria. And it's also known as the happy bacteria because it is known to actually affect human mind so that you actually feel happier, you're calmer, you're more focused, you can work. And it was perfect for our project, definitely. Yeah, there we go. So with the mud, we can get the right kind of microbes into that space. And then if you look closely, you can see that there are some larger bamboo tubes going out of the mud hut into the tree right outside the pavilion. And then there's another tube that goes out the other end of the mud hut that goes into the space. So, and then there's a fourth tube that I built, which actually goes out through the window and into the roots of the tree. So my idea was to connect with the tree in terms of bringing in microbes from the root of the tree, from the earth, and then also from the leaves of the tree, we get oxygen. So my aim was to create not only a good microbial base, but also to have a kind of flow of air and energies and microbes from the tree itself. Okay. Yeah, here's the inside of the space. This is the treatment bench. Maybe go one further. Yeah, there's the bamboo. So this is when they were constructing it. I think that's the last image, isn't it? Oh, yeah, no, this is cute. So, yeah, I don't think it needs any comment. I'll leave everything else for questions and comments later. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Aziza.
Hello, can you hear me? So do
yeah.
I just click on share tray?
Yes.
Okay, let me see. I've never done this before. Okay. And then would it show me a specific screen?
It will give you the options of whatever is open on your desktop to choose from.
Okay, it's not giving me.
It has to be open already.
Yeah, it is open. It's a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry, I'm just more actions. No, it's not giving me a choice. So do you want me to send it to you?
If you email it to me, I will open it, Aziza.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Just it's not giving me any. No. Are you sure that you've allowed me to share it?
Yeah.
No, it's not giving me. Okay, I will send it to you. So if you want to go to the next person, and I will just send you the link. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Okay,
Don't know why it's not
let's
working.
Let's do that. Okay, Marcos, do you want to turn on your audio, Marcos? And I'll...
Yes, so hello everybody. You hear me? Yes, good. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate at this wonderful event. We are very happy to be both featured in this amazing book and also to be featured at the cover. That's yeah, a great pleasure to see that the picture in the cover. My name is Marcos, and I'm a partner at Basalt Architects, which is an architecture company based in Iceland, in Reykjavik. And we do all type of projects on all type of scales. But today we're going to be concentrating on the bathing related projects that we've done, fortunately, quite a few. And I'm going to maybe show a few pictures that I have put together, just to give you an idea of what we do. Let me see. Yes, so everybody sees this image? Good. Okay. So these are my partners. In the middle, Sigriður Sigþórsdóttir, which is the founder of the company. It's a company that is 10 years old. Sorry. Here is my partner, Þórður Karlsella, and myself. And together we have a team of 15 architects and designers. And we often collaborate with many other practitioners and designers in other fields. Let me see, 1 second. All right. Something going on here? Yeah, here. Okay.
Increíble, Milo.
Okay, so you still, I'm trying to share. I don't know what's happening. Something weird happening. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so I think this is sharing now. Okay, so this is a project in the north of Iceland, in Hofsós, and this is purely a public swimming pool. And this was my first encounter, or my first project where I was in touch with bathing culture. It opened in 2010. And what is special about this project is not only the amazing location, which is incredible, and the closeness to the ocean and the amazing views, but also you notice the particular rotation of the swimming pool, how it points precisely to this island over here. And the reason for that is that in the old Icelandic sagas, there's a story about a villain that once had to escape from the island because he was being persecuted, and he had to swim all the way to this island. And so we found this to be a very interesting story, and we wanted to link our design to that saga. So we rotated the pool in that way, in a way that when you swim in the pool, you are swimming towards the island. You're sort of recreating the history of the place in a way. So a very sort of like poetic and modest way to create something deeper in meaning. The building itself is very modest, like you can see, is sunken in the ground, so it doesn't disturb the views from the town. Other projects, such as this one, which is also in the north of Iceland, in another area, and here the particularity of this project is both the location, which sits on a cliff where you have amazing views of the ocean, but also the quality of the water in which you bathe, which is geothermal water, but it's also seawater with salt. So it's very special and it's very good for your skin. And this project is all about creating an experience and the connection with the surrounding context. So you can see in this image how, like once you're in the water, you are completely immersed in the field of water that is around you, and you are of course exposed to the changing weather conditions and even to the wild sea life. This town is very famous also for whale watching. So sometimes you can see whales and birds, and it's nice. What is also important about this project is that they are obviously create a market for tourism, but at the same time they link very well into the local communities. So it's you know, create this mix about, you know, mix of foreign and local cultures that we think is very interesting and very important, and also links very much to the tradition, bathing tradition of Iceland, which is very unique and strong. This other project, which is a more known project, which is an extension we recently did to the existing Blue Lagoon, where we have a hotel and a retreat spa area. And again, what is important in this project is the integration of the building within the landscape itself. And I'm going to show you a few images of this. Obviously, this is all a man-made lagoon, so it was excavated. And what is particular about it is that during the process of excavation, many interesting things happened. Like we would discover particular, you know, rock formations, caves, and so on that we wanted to integrate into the project. So the project had to be like redesigned constantly as we were building it. So it was an interesting process trying to incorporate all these features into the architecture. And you have intimate moments like this when you have a lagoon and you are completely enclosed by the rock formations, and you have other moments in other areas of the lagoon where it's more of a shared sort of experience. And this is one of the few saunas that are in this project. You can see maybe the rock formation that is completely covering you, and a ray of light, natural light that comes from the ceiling. Some other projects, you maybe realize that the projects are very different in aesthetic qualities, and that's something we celebrate very much. We try to approach every project with no preconceptions about how it should look, but we look more about what the experiences that we want to work with. So we work within, you know, experience-based approach, let's say, but also taking into account the context and the landscapes. This is another public bathing project, one that sits on the beach of Akranes. And what is interesting is in this project is dealing with the condition of the topographic condition of the beach itself. So the project creates 3 different platforms: one for viewing the ocean, one for bathing. It's also geothermal water. And this geothermal water goes down to the lower pool that blends with the water of the ocean. So you have, again, like multiple ways to experience the project. It's also a very small project and modest, but the ambitions, like you can see, they're very large. And what is also fun about this project is that it encourages people to go sea bathing, just because of the closeness with the ocean. So it brings sea bathing to a larger sort of like group of people that would never go into swimming in the ocean in the winter, for example. And here you can just basically jump in and jump back to the hot water in a way. And finally, another project. I hope I'm not going to take too much time. This is a more recent project, Walk Paths, which is actually the project that is featured in the cover of the book. And again, the changing conditions of the weather are incredible. So this is last winter, it was completely covered by water. And what is important in this project is the connection with an existing lake and how the bathing connects with the experience of bathing in the lake. So we have these two. We have an inland bathing area, and we have 2 pools in the water that float up and down. This is a tidal lake, so the water goes up and down. And collaborating with a Finnish company, we managed to create these bathing, floating pools. And of course, the context, again, super important. And the water of this project is also very unique. It's geothermal water, but it's actually very I think it's the only geothermal water in Iceland that you can just basically drink because it's really pure, and it's been used to make tea and bread and even beer. They create their own beer with this water, geothermal water. And again, the landscape and the conditions that you find are quite unique. During the winter, the aurora borealis is quite impressive in this part of the island. I think this is my last image for now. So I'll just leave it there. If you have any questions about any project, we would be happy to discuss.
Thank you, Marcos. I'm going to try and share this, okay, Aziza?
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I'm super happy to be here. And after very cold climates, we're going to go now to a hotter climate, my home country, Morocco. And in more particular, the thermal bath complex of Sidi Harazem, designed in the 1960s by Jean-François Zevaco. Next, please. So the project, I wanted to start by sharing with you my own personal story with the project. I was brought to this thermal bath located a few kilometers outside of my hometown of Fez by my late grandmother, Saida, that you can see here. Because she strongly believed by bathing in the water every few months, her rheumatisms would go away. And actually, she told us that she actually didn't need to see any doctor, that the holy water of the thermal bath was healing her. So from a very young age, I used to go to this thermal bath that was actually very well known across Morocco because of its hot water that had healing powers. Next, please. So it didn't just have healing powers, it was actually also had the spiritual dimension. Because the thermal bath was located in the middle of an oasis. And you can see here inside the oasis on the top left is a little mausoleum where a saintly figure, Sufi figure, was buried in the 12th century. And his name was Sidi Harazem. And the fact that the spring was emerging right next to his mausoleum conferred to it this mystical healing power. And so tons of people for centuries have been coming to the saint to pay visit to the saint, but also to bath in its water. And the station, I mean, actually, there are some historians that claim that the Romans actually used to bath in this water, hot spring already. And so when my grandmother was a young girl, that was in the 1920s and 30s, she actually learned how to swim in the basin that you can see here on the lower left hand side. And so the oasis back then had the mausoleum, was set in the middle of the very lush oasis, and had these small pools. One for children, one for women, and one for men. And actually, this in a way broke certain cliches I had, that Muslim women's bodies had to be hidden. My grandmother told me that she used to bath with just, you know, like a specific robe. And you know, I mean, obviously the men's pool was a little bit far away, but there was not, in a way, this, you know, kind of this shame of the body, you know, as we would have imagined to be. So even myself being Moroccan, I would not have believed that my grandmother was actually bathing in the middle of this oasis with tons of people, and she learned how to swim there. And on the top right is the original small village that was next to the oasis that lived off agriculture, but also catering to tourists that came to the spring. Next, please. And when Morocco became independent in the 1956, it launched a series of large infrastructural tourism projects. And Sidi Harazem was actually one of the first ones. So it was launched by the State Pension Fund in 1959. And it took 15 years to build. And it was a gigantic state-of-the-art thermal bath station designed by Jean-François Zevaco, who is a French Corsican architect born and raised in Morocco, spent his entire life in Morocco and died in Morocco, and built over 100 projects. So he's actually not very well known, you know, like across the world, but is I mean, I call him the Niemeyer of North Africa. And his architecture is splendid, extremely well detailed. And as I will show you, I mean, as you can see in this aerial view of the construction site that I was able to find in his archive, The bath is located on the thermal complex on a site that's actually steep, and so the pool that you can see in the foreground is actually integrated within the landscape, and the rest of the project composed of an entrance plaza with a public fountain, fed by the spring, a hotel, cafes with plazas, bungalows that are technically a modern reinterpretation of the Medina, which is the medieval Islamic town, composed of 1 to 3 small bedrooms with the courtyard and a kitchen. So that was basically catering to the needs of Moroccan tourists, and a craft market here. And all of these were organized around, next please, around a central courtyard that he called the Riyadh, which was composed of a series of different small basins and cascades and fountains. And in a sense, despite the fact that the station had an aesthetic that was extremely modern, its designer, the architect Jean-François Zévaco, was actually very, very keen on making like a reference to vernacular architecture. So you can see on the right, Riyadh in my hometown of Fez, in the old city, which all had, water feature. Most of the houses had a water feature in the center of the home. As you all know, Morocco is a Muslim country, and water has also a spiritual and cleaning, let's say, quality, since you need to do of ablutions before each one of the 5 prayers of the day. Next, please. And this is one of the original drawings of Zévaco, and you can see in blue how he actually created a set of different natural ponds on the top part, and that separated the original oasis with the mausoleum from his own design. On the left is this swimming pool that was fed by the spring, and after each day the water was released into this lagoon, on top of which the pool was floating. And finally, you can see here the Riyadh, around which all of the other programs are organized. Next, please. And you see that Zévaco used natural gravity to get the water from the top entrance, which is located here on the left, and to drain it all the way down, like to the bottom of the thermal bath. And then the water was released on a nearby river. Some photos of underneath of that central Riyadh / courtyard with stairs and gardens floating. Next, please. And what's really incredible about the thermal bath is that despite this brutalist aesthetic, of everywhere you go, you would actually hear water following you. So on the left, you can see that even across the stairs, you have this little groove that led water, like down. And on the right, the central courtyard with the market beyond it. And on the top, you can see a plan that we drew from scanned plans of the central courtyard with all of the water features. Next, please. And there are some quite exquisite surprises in this thermal bath, like this vertical fountain system called a water buffet that Zévaco placed at the bottom of the hotel, that was lifted in a very modernist fashion on pilotis, very sculptural pilotis. Next, please. And this is a photo of the pool. This was when it was built. Next, please. And the public fountain and some original postcards from the site, marketing the site. Next, please. And unfortunately, what happened to the thermal bath was that beach tourism became more popular. So thermalism in Morocco was actually the main, let's say, vacation destination, because it has, a leisure quality, but it also has this spiritual quality. But as the 70s arrived and the 80s, large beach resorts were developed, and less Moroccan went into the thermal bath. So it started to fall apart and be closed down. And also very, I would say, insensitive rehabilitation that wanted to Moroccanize the thermal bath by putting tiles, like on top of it, further degraded it. Next, please. And also what you see here in blue are, you had the growth informally, some of them formal, of, additional buildings, but also informal markets started to emerge as the formal buildings were closed down. So it was actually in extremely poor shape, and I witnessed it, every summer or winter when I came to visit Morocco. I saw that it was actually declining. Next, please. I contacted the owners, and they wanted to sell the thermal bath to a Chinese company that was going to demolish it and build some golf resort. Thankfully, it was so well built and it was so expensive to demolish because it was all concrete that didn't happen. In the meanwhile, I applied to the Keeping It Modern grant from the Getty Foundation that actually funds rehabilitation studies and conservation management plan, and we completed it. And I'm very happy to say that now for the past year, we have started the first phase of the rehabilitation of the gigantic complex. And so I'm going to go very quickly, just very, very quickly, we're going to go to the different phases of the conservation management plan: data connection, analysis, and diagnosis, rehabilitation, and public engagement. Next, please. So the first one was actually over 3 continents, since the archives were all spread of Zivaco, and we were able to retrieve the original drawing, the original plans, like this entrance sculpture called the Signal, where he used all the different type of concretes that he was going to use for the thermal bath. This is an ink drawing. Next, please. We also, based on this drawing, we did, full 3D models. This is the stairs that would lead you from the main plaza, down to the pool. Next, please. Some other drawings. This is like the central courtyard at the top with all of the different water features. Next, please. And then we got all of this information together with what's existing on site to try to see what were things that were added, what things that were changed. Next. And also we started to survey all of the problems with the growth of vegetation, lack of maintenance, moss that was growing, and also this terrible on the upper left-hand side rehabilitation done in 2000. Next, but all this is being taken off. We also use social media in a way that was actually extremely successful, because sometimes we couldn't find information on certain parts of the thermal bath, and we launched a campaign to ask people to submit their memories and photos, and we sent some amazing 1970s ancestors of the selfies, I guess, of people standing in the thermal bath and using the thermal bath. Next, please. And we also came up with a concept that would expand the tourist base, because in Morocco, thermalism is only seasonal. So we actually mixed with the thermal bath facility a culinary school as well as the design center, since next to Sidi Harzem is the Medina of Fez, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And also one thing is that the thermal bath was supposed to have a spa that was never built because it was part of phase 2 and the state pension fund didn't have money to do it. So we did propose to build, a spa facility. Next, please. And this is the final master plan. In orange, the set of original buildings that we plan to restore. In green, new buildings that we plan to add, mainly the spa, which is located here, which we placed it mostly underground so that we don't affect the landscape where the original pool is placed. And this big building is a market where we plan to house all of the informal stall owners. Next, please. And the way that we designed the master plan was in a collaborative fashion. It was very important for the local population to become aware of the modern heritage of the site. So we did a series of workshops where we asked them to propose new programs and to rate the programs that we're proposing. Next. And so through an exhibition, we did ask them, the one before is an exhibition where they voted with this little smileys on the different type of programs. Next. And then we did a series of workshops with card. We developed a board game where the local population was able to give us also their suggestions. And the master plan is a result of all of this year-long consultation process. Next, please. Which in Morocco is super unusual. We also, launched a series of awareness program, since actually this is going to be the first modern 1960s building renovated in Morocco. And so we trained young girls to be, local girls to be architecture tour guides, etc. Next, please. And we did the treasure hunt also for local children to find columns of Sivako. Next, through the thermal bath. Next. And, and next, please, so that we can go. Yeah, and this is just a rendering of the restoration of the entrance plaza that had a series of grooves with water that run all through it that today are covered and doesn't have a canopy anymore. So we brought in a canopy. What you see here is the public fountain. So a lot of people actually bring bottled waters and they get this water and they take it with them since it is holy. Next, please. And maybe I think that this is a video, if you can press play on it. No, I think it should be open on, it should be open in PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And
I
I sent you
open in PDF.
It's fine. It would have been, I send you a link also to the video, but maybe you can show it, at the end if there is time, because then people can see the space and how people use the water. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Thanks so much, Aziza. Can Yuma, you are able to screen share, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Does everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. Hi. Thank you, Christy, for the invitation to talk today. My name is Yuma Shinohara. I'm a assistant curator at the Swiss Architecture Museum in Basel, and I am going to attempt to screen share. Let's see. So, is it showing up? Are we okay? Does everyone see the image?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, yeah, so sorry. Thanks again, Christy. I'm going to really quickly talk about today the project Swim City, which is an exhibition that I co-curated with Andreas Ruby and Barbara Guser, two colleagues at the Swiss Architecture Museum. And this is an exhibition about the culture of urban river swimming in Switzerland. So as you may or may not know, in Switzerland there's a lively culture of kind of using urban waterways for recreation and for bathing, which is to say it's not just possible, but also very common to go swimming in the middle of the city in the river, and I'm not even talking about bathing houses in the river, but also kind of just on the open water, right? What's remarkable about this culture is how this activity is anchored in the everyday life of many Swiss people. So it's actually not too uncommon to hear about people who swim to work, for example, or who take 30 minutes out of their lunch break to go take a dip in the river, or which is much more common, to go meet at the river kind of after work, for example, to have a drink with colleagues, and then maybe take a short dip in the river, swim around a little bit. It's in many ways the river or the lake in many Swiss cities becomes the center of urban life, especially during the warmer months. I can talk about Basel in particular, where in the summer the entire city kind of tends to orient itself towards the river. It becomes the default place where people meet and people hang out, and it also becomes kind of the space where you see, in a sense, almost the cross-section across all the different populations that inhabit the city, which is something that you can't even say about, for example, even the central marketplace in Switzerland. So it becomes really the public space par excellence in the summer. Of course, in many ways, this culture is taken for granted in Switzerland. A lot of people grow up swimming in rivers, and I think that it's very natural to be able to use rivers in this way. But for many of us coming from other contexts, I think we all recognize that in a sense, this is actually a very remarkable phenomenon that they have here in Switzerland. And so this exhibition, Swim City, was an attempt to take a closer look at this phenomenon and to essentially ask the question, well, what is it here? What is it about Switzerland that allows for such a phenomenon to take place? What are the conditions that need to be that need to be in place in order to use the river in this way? So on the one hand, the exhibition is a celebration, I'd say, of the culture of river swimming in Switzerland. You see here a film that we commissioned for the exhibition by a video artist named Jörg Egli, who's based in Zurich, who actually went and filmed the river swimming scene in 4 different cities in Switzerland. But also at the same time, beyond celebrating the culture of river swimming, we wanted to use this exhibition as an occasion to kind of do a critical history of river swimming in Switzerland, because as we also found out, it was never always the case that you could use the rivers and waterways in Swiss cities in this way. This was actually something that had to be won back. You know, it was a kind of a use of the river that had to be won back through a variety of different movements, both from the top down as well as bottom up. What essentially we wanted to do with this exhibition is to uncover the conditions, of course, the visible conditions, such as built environment, infrastructure, but also some of the invisible, sometimes invisible conditions that, be they environmental or legal, that essentially allow for a certain kind of relationship to the water in the urban context, right? And finally, as a way to end out the exhibition, we presented 6 projects from outside of Switzerland that are also attempting to realize, at least to some extent, a similar urban river swimming culture in their particular context. So we have here on the left, you see a project in Berlin, Flussbad Berlin, which I think, Christy, you included in your book. Also projects from Paris, London, Boston, New York, and Brussels. And this is, I think, in a way, was a way to also kind of show how, you know, our relationship to the river in cities is not just something that is relevant for Switzerland, but also is something that has a global resonance, right? Ultimately, the exhibition advocates, I would say, for a new perspective on urban bathing and swimming, not just as a recreational activity, but actually as a very important cultural practice that has the ability to transform water or aquatic space into public space, and at the same time expand possibilities and spaces for sociality within the city. And finally, also a practice that helps to suture by making waterways usable as an extension somehow of land or the public spaces that we know from land. They help suture together fragmented urban fabrics, right? So we have been a lot of the projects, a lot of the presentations today, you know, very interesting presentation have been talking about, you know, bathing as this kind of moment of sociality, moment of intimacy, perhaps in a very kind of, let's say, intimate context. But I think with this exhibition, we also wanted to point out that bathing can also have a certain relevance for the larger urban scale as well. And kind of when we talk about and when we think about the futures of our cities, it's very important to also think about the waterways and how we use them as well in order to make more livable cities. And I look forward to talking more about this in the discussion. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I wanted to say that I'm going to extend the session to 2:15 so we have time to talk a little bit. And if there are people who have to leave, I understand. I'm going to start right in with a question for you, Yuma. And these questions are coming from students, but also from myself. And first, you know, thank you, all of you, for these wonderful, provocative presentations, and just to see them all and hear them all together shifts the way that you look at bathing and urban bathing. And I think such a good point that you made about the urban infrastructure, the larger scale. You talked about seaming together the city, you know, the functions of the bathing place, not just as a personal ritual, but as something of great social impact. And I just want to focus on pollution because we have a question about here in Toronto, in Canada, our cities are on often highly polluted waterways, right? And many cities around the world struggle with this. You know, with the perception of the lake as being unclean and dangerous due to water pollution, how can we rectify this perception and encourage people to use the water more? How can dialogue around this issue even begin? And how did Basel do this and other Swiss cities achieve this?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And if I understand correctly, the water quality is actually in reality not that bad. It's mostly the perception that is kind of discouraging people from using the water. Yeah, it's very that's a very pertinent question, because I think Basel is a very good example of a city. You know, I talked about kind of the history of urban river swimming and how this is something that actually had to be won back. Basel, if you actually look at even like maybe 50 years ago, you know, if you look at the 70s and 80s, the Basel had a really bad problem with water pollution, and it was actually almost unthinkable that you would go swimming in the river. You know, there continued to be bathing houses in the river, but many of them were actually closed down or demolished at the time because just because they were very unpopular. You know, no one really wanted to kind of go near the water. I think, of course, you know, there was the problem, of course, that the water was actually quite polluted, also due to a lot of industrial runoff that was ameliorated over the course of the 80s, as in many other cities, I think. But I think what was very crucial, what was very critical in kind of then, you know, changing the perception of the river from dirty to clean was really the efforts of certain, let's say, radical actors who began. I'm thinking particularly in Basel. There's a very interesting group. Interesting and also well-established group. It's the Swiss Association of Lifeguards, or lifeguarding swimmers, I guess they would call themselves. And they had already kind of, over the course of the 80s, had kind of started to recognize that the water quality is actually not as bad as its reputation would be, and they started to just among themselves kind of do kind of guerrilla swims in the river, where they would just organize small groups and kind of go out and take swims in the river. You know, and this is at a time when it was almost, well, you know, you would have been kind of seen strangely if you were out in the river. But so basically, these as kind of small guerrilla swims started to establish themselves. They began to make it into a yearly kind of activity, and then eventually also began to invite people outside of this inner circle. And here, I think it was very important that kind of through kind of these initial swims, they had developed a certain expertise and also knowledge of the river, so that they can also kind of invite people in and, in a sense, also ensure their safety. I think perception of cleanliness is one aspect, but also perception of safety is also a big hurdle that I think you need to go over before you can, you know, kind of open up this culture to a wider audience. And so this. Yeah, I think it really, to answer your question, Bracia, I think it comes down really to kind of just start using the river. You know, even if the perception is not there, even if, you know, even if let's say the general reputation of the river still is very negative, I think what at least in Basel what happened at least in Basel is that once you see people using river, being in the river, swimming in the river, then you start to kind of shift your perception of kind of what possibilities there might be inherent in the river. And Boston is a similar I think case here. I won't talk about it too much, but there you also have kind of it's the process there is a little bit more delayed. It started kind of in the 2000s, but here you also have the problem of the river is more or less swimmable in terms of water quality, but perception is bad, and so there are groups there that are now starting to kind of create urban swimming events. I'd say organized events where everyone jumps into the river. And I think kind of it's really these small steps that I think eventually do make a difference.
Right. Thanks, Dima.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to direct a question to Mikhail, which a few questions here for you have to do with this locale, the importance of the locale and the local culture, as Yuma is pointing out, that people have to participate in the local culture to make a kind of transformation, and the positive association of swimming in the river outweigh the perception. I was listening to Sauna Talks podcast that Mikhail was on, when he talked about living in San Francisco and having a sauna built with a community pool, enjoying the public aspect. What is the cultural difference like between community bathing in San Francisco and in North America, and the other half of your life that you spend in Norway? Is the culture of bathing in North American cities less ingrained in daily life compared to other countries?
Okay, well, we could talk all day about that, but it really comes down to something that Gideon talks about in Mechanization Takes Command. He says you can learn a lot about a culture by looking at their bathing habits. And so if we look at the bathing habits of North America, we have to say, with some exceptions, of course, the shower is the dominant bathing method. And let's just keep in mind what bathing is all about. Bathing is about cleanliness, right? At the most fundamental level, we're just talking about getting clean. And this is something that we do as a species. We clean ourselves. We clean ourselves internally on a level, and we clean ourselves externally on our skin. So at the basis of everything is cleanliness, okay? That's kind of our foundation where we work from. And bathing then comes on top of that. So in North America, the bathing system, if you will, is the shower. And what is the shower? The shower represents something that really is relatively new in history. It came during the industrial period, and it was actually called the rain bath when it was introduced. And what it does is it allows you to get clean very quickly. So there's a speed, there's an efficiency to it. And it also does it superficially, because it only works on the surface of the skin. And it's also solitary. So if you think of those three things, efficient, quick, and solitary, what are we speaking to? We're speaking to a culture of America, with the exceptions of the immigrants and the native people who had a bathing culture that was much more developed. So this is a challenge for North America, is to work against that and to bring in variety, bring in depth that Europeans, that I share half my genetics with, have had a long history. Now you think North America, of course, is settled by largely at the beginning by Europeans, but the Europeans that came here a lot of them were religious Puritans, the people that really didn't, they were very suspicious of anything that was sensual, that was relaxing. So the bathing culture here kind of has also that foundation, the religious, we don't want to feel good because that's not right. So there's a lot of forces that are working against bathing as we, all of us in this room, virtual room are interested in. We're really fighting upstream to bring a more holistic form of cleaning ourselves. So yes, okay, in San Francisco, which is a little more of a, I guess it's a more diverse city. We have a lot of Russians, we have a lot of Finns, Norwegians, we have people from Islamic nations. So there's an immigrant scene here, and the Bath is more there's more variety here. But my challenge, and what I've been working at for 45 years now, maybe a little bit like Julia Child tried to bring variety into the eating habits of Americans, which was meat and potatoes. I'm just trying to bring more variety into the bathing culture of North America. And living in San Francisco is obviously like living a little bit in a bubble. But to get over to Dallas, to get outside of this bubble is a challenge. And I think right now, the biggest challenge we have, and there's an elephant in this room that I really hope that we could have addressed more, which is the coronavirus. And viruses in general and pandemics in general, they're going to affect everything that we do as architects, as writers, as artists. I mean, listen, I was here in the 70s in San Francisco when we had the AIDS crisis. My book came out in 1978, and it was a time when bathing was really starting to shoot upwards. The hot tub phenomena, the sauna phenomena. AIDS shot that down. It just completely shut the door on many of the public bathhouses. I've seen what happens, and I'm afraid it's happening again. Right now, as we speak, all over the world, bathhouses, public bathhouses are shut down. I don't know what Katie's experiencing in London. I know that in Norway they've shut down. I know in Germany they all shut down. So we have to be talking right now about what to do about this phenomenon. How are we going to bring people back into these public spaces when 250,000 Americans are dead right now? They're going to be a little bit worried about going to a public space. Excuse me. So as architects, as writers, as journalists, we have to figure out ways. We have to talk about ways to make it safe for people to go into public spaces again. That's what we should be talking about. Sorry, I'll stop now.
Katie,
I have a question, actually for you. It's an excellent question because in Morocco, the thermal bath is closed, and the local population that's extremely poor is affected horribly. They've already left. Some of them have already left the village and are starting new type of jobs. But my question is, should we just wait for a vaccine, or should we imagine the practice? Because, obviously the same number of people cannot use the bath as it used to be. But so is it by limiting the number? I mean, let's speak about practicalities. It's not just about designing. It's going to take too long to design a new facility. How can we use the current ones in a different way?
Brilliant. Exactly. That's what we need to be talking about, because it's really clear now that we have to find ways of making these things viable when you only have 5 customers instead of 500 paying. So this is something very practical for the bath owner. Anybody that owns a public bath right now is saying, how do I survive when I only can have 5 customers at any time? And these are the kind of questions we should be talking about. And there's ways to get around it. During the Middle Ages, when they also had a lot of pandemics, there was a lot of closure of bathhouses. You know what some of the bathhouses in Germany did? They turned into bakeries because they had the ovens there. They pivoted and turned into another way of making money. I'm not saying that we should turn into our bathhouses into bakeries, but I'm saying that there's ways that we start to think how they can make a living, how a bathhouse owner can make a living when they don't have the revenue stream. Now, there's a lot of things that come to my mind. One thing is we frame public bathing as a public health issue, and we need to do that. And if we frame it as a public health issue, then you have money that can come in from the community. It can come in from the state. It can come in from grants, because this is now something bigger than just one commercial venture on a corner. It's all of us together. We need to then support it and support the bathhouses. That's one way. Another way, bathhouses can also, you know, like I said, they not become bakeries, but pivot to other things, other ways to make money. But we need to be helping them. We can't just be making the bathhouse. We have to think in terms of the business. And by framing it as a public health issue, we can at least start to get some public monies going to support or subsidize.
Katie, what do you think?
Well, just that we've had to do exactly that, because obviously we've got our public spa, but we're fortunate. Well, we're closed at the moment because everything's closed. But what we did do after the first lockdown is that we redesigned our spa, because we're a pop-up. So there's something for me about the way we build things now. Like we build, you know, things built in like very heavy, solid, forever. Why maybe that's not how we build things anymore. Like the fact that we had all our saunas in trailers meant we could spread them out. We've created zones. We've now got 3 sauna zones. We can have 3 groups of 6 people, and then we like sanitize each sauna between sessions. And then we have, you know, people can still come and have their group, but with a smaller group, and they're next to other groups, but they're not actually interacting. So we've completely redesigned our bathhouse so that so that it works for the pandemic. But we've done that. We've been able to do that because of the nature of how we built it in the beginning, which is movable. So I wonder if, like, going forwards in the future, when we build things, we make things that like are, you know, flexible, the way that they can be used and moved and reimagined.
And that's to do with scale. You're talking about smaller groups of people being able to share a space, but not everybody in such a large scale. I mean, that's part of what your model is, right?
Yeah, before we had 3 saunas and we had like 20 people that would move between all of them. And now we've 18 people, still the same amount, but they just have to stick with 1 sauna. So there's a limitation on, you know, on the, you know, experience for people, but they're still enjoying it. They're still, you know, before last week when they closed us down, we were fully booked every day. So,
just one note from the global south, where, you know, a lot of these bathing facilities are informal, or have, you know, like some parts of them that are informal. Sidi Harzem has become part of it. There are many other places. What I've seen the government doing now is that they're using the pandemic, the fact that things are closed down, to upgrade certain facilities that are either informal, unsanitary, or are obsolete or too old. So that's, I mean, the pandemic has so many negative things. I think 99%, but maybe 1% is also the time to update certain old facilities also. And this is what I've seen happening in Morocco.
Marcos, what's it like in Iceland? Are you experiencing the same? I mean, your country has approached the pandemic maybe differently than North America and the UK.
No, in general, it's a similar case, actually. Right now, actually, everything is shut down. But the good thing about Iceland is just, on one hand, it's such a small population. We're talking about 350,000 in the whole country. And it's a very, very large piece of land. So it's very easy to control things. So with limited sort of like procedures, you can control the virus very quickly and stop everything in 2 weeks, and then everything is good again, in a way, you know. So it is very easy in that way. Another thing is that what is good here in Iceland is the bathing tradition and the geothermal quality of this bathing tradition, that you can basically bathe yourself in nature. There is not always the need for going into a facility, to a building, but you can just go to the countryside and find rivers, hot springs, and all sort of geothermal water pieces that you can bathe in. And those are always open, those are always available, and most of the times they're empty, because we're talking about many distributed through the whole country. But it's a very difficult question, what to do in these cases, and I guess we will just find out.
Yuma.
Yeah, no, I just want to add to what Marcos was saying, because there was a very similar situation here in Switzerland where the open air pools, etc., bathing facilities closed, bathing facilities were closed. but you can't close the river or the lake. You know, you can't block off an entire, let's say, promenade along the river and people. And so you did see that kind of the swimming in the river. I don't know. I don't know how it was relative, let's say, to other years, but I did really notice that kind of the river or swimming in the river became a very important kind of way in which people could actually take part in recreational activities. Of course, in Switzerland, we had kind of a more, let's say, relaxed approach. We didn't have a kind of a total lockdown where you couldn't go outside, and so you were free to kind of move in space and move around. But you know, what I think I want to say with this is that I think one solution kind of course, it doesn't, you know, solve the problems of the operators of these bathing facilities, but it, you know, in order to fill this need for bathing opportunities, even in a pandemic era, is to kind of look at, I think, these natural or maybe man-made waterways that exist already in the city, which tend to be much larger and can have, you know, have a much larger capacity and allow for much, let's say, safer distance swimming. And I think, you know, we have seen, I think, during this pandemic, how many cities have reacted to this by, you know, putting in stuff like pop-up bike lanes and kind of closing streets to traffic and, you know, really making quite large interventions in urban space that before the pandemic were kind of off the table somehow. And I think, you know, to shift the conversation to bathing and swimming, I think this could also be an interesting moment if, you know, if the cities, municipalities, the governments would kind of start to think about, okay, well, what exactly is keeping us from making, you know, our harbors and rivers and lakes swimmable? Right, because often, as we were talking about earlier, you know, Christy, like, it's not the water quality that's really a problem. In many ways, in many places, it's really the legal restrictions, right, that forbid swimming, that because of liability problems or whatever, that I think are in the way of kind of really developing these open urban swimming possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I can see there's two sort of different traditions here, and Mikhail sort of articulated them, that we have these kind of internal, more internalized sweat traditions, and then these more external nature-related, you know, the hot springs that Marcos is experiencing, in contrast to maybe Pia, your experience in Finland is more likely of saunas. I'm imagining saunas are shut in Finland during COVID. They're not. Tell us. We can't hear you.
Yeah, the saunas are open, but that it's not a fair thing to say in a sense that we do have a very good situation in terms of COVID right now. So they were closed from a few months in the spring. Pools and saunas public saunas were closed, but they're all open now. That has a lot to do with what the COVID seems to be like, that it doesn't actually spread so easily in the pool, maybe a little bit easier in the sauna, but not even there. It seems like it actually spreads better on the ice hockey field because that's cold and the virus likes the cold. So these are these kinds of details that they are now discovering in Finland, at least. But I would actually rather speak of this idea of contagion more broadly. You're talking about pollution, you're talking about many different, I mean, even just Mikkel knows this, that in the medieval ages, the bathhouses in Europe were seen contagious in a social way. And we're really talking much more about this idea that there's a scare, there's a contagion, there's this risk of other bodies and microbes that really is what is at the heart of any pandemic or any kind of reason to close down any kind of corporeal materiality, you know, and that's what also makes it so that then our cultures shift to deny the materiality of the body and the materiality of our experiences. And you know, obviously, what we're talking about is that. And also health, but they're all intertwined, you know, like the acceptance of your body, the acceptance of the materiality of your body is also about being able to stay healthy. But so I don't have particular answers to how to solve this problem, but maybe exactly this awareness of what is at the bottom of our need to secure and be safe is this, rather than some invisible enemy that we think we can destroy, which is ridiculous because there will always be something, you know. I myself have been thinking that because I was asked to actually revisit the sauna now, and in the United States. So I am now myself looking at this, okay, what would I do when the pandemic is in such a state? What would be the most important thing to bring into that experience? So we need to be isolated physically, but sauna, to me, is always very social. Even if it's, I mean, a lot of times you are silent in the sauna, not always, but a lot of times. It has nothing to do with that kind of sociality. It has to do with a shared experience. And it's not even a shared experience just in that moment, it's in history. Like if I go into my sauna or the saunas that I go into here, it's because as soon as I enter that sauna, I'm with my mother, I'm with my grandmother, I am completely immersed in a different time and time and space. Yeah. Okay. So how to bring that about without necessarily forcing people to be too close to one another and being scared about nudity, being scared about microbes, you know. So that's what I'm looking at. So I'm actually just looking at something that I, when I was looking at the sauna tradition, when I was doing the thesis, I came across during the war, Second World War in Finland, the Finnish soldiers, they couldn't go into a sauna. They didn't have time to build saunas wherever they were on the front. So instead, they dug holes into the ground. They would find a slope, and then they would dig a hole into the ground, 45-degree angle, just big enough for a human being to go into it. They would heat the rocks, throw the rocks in the bottom of that pit, and then crawl in there, and then throw water. That's a sauna. It's a pod for one person. So you could totally imagine having like a pattern or a formation of these pods. So you are in your own little pod, but you're still sharing it together.
Right.
So yeah, that's just what I'm thinking.
Marcus, you had a comment.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I completely relate to what you're saying, Pia, and in the context of Iceland, going to a pool, something that you do almost every day, has a very social aspect. Basically, the way we use pools is not so much about swimming or things like that, but it's more about going to the hot pot and socializing with others, like talking to your neighbors or the people that usually go to the pool. And you create these sort of social links where you can discuss, talk about the weather or talk about politics or anything. And everybody sort of becomes down at the same level in a way. You are like partly naked and you are in the water and very sort of like exposed in a way. And so everybody's at the same level. The hierarchies somehow like disappear. And you can talk about things and relate to each other in a very particular way. So yeah, I just wanted to comment on that social aspect of bathing, which is very, very important in Icelandic culture.
Yeah, Yuma, did you want to say something?
Oh, did I still have my hand up?
Oh, your hand is up. Okay.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I must have done that by mistake.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's so important what you're saying, Pia, about the contagion, the symbolic dimension of all of this stuff. And I thought it was interesting how when you were talking, I thought about Aziza's images of the pure original modernist stare, and then the fear of cultural contagion, that a too European approach was being corrected through tile, Aziza, that there was a more attempt to create something that's more authentically, you know, a bit of anxiety about cultural contagion, as well as this biochemical contagion. And in a way, I think Pia is saying that in some way, we need to embrace that, you know, at least include it or incorporate this symbolic contagion into everything that we do, you know, as architects or designers as much as bathers.
I mean, it's an excellent question. I think for the case of Sidi Hazem and Morocco, it's more complex because the rehabilitation that happened in 2000 was intended to attract more tourists and more international tourists. So international tourists are expected to like something that looks Moroccan. You know, if something doesn't look Moroccan and it's in concrete, then it's not going to be attracted to them. So I call it pastiche. It's a pastiche type of, you know, it's a resurfacing of something that's originally was not intended to be so. And I tend to believe that the fact that how the project in a way reinterpreted a vernacular, let's say, typology of the courtyard house, of the different type of bathing and the role of water and the introverted typology is much more local than, you know, like a tile that's poorly added on top of the concrete, that trying to hide the true identity of that project that happened in the 60s when Morocco wanted a progressive modern identity, right? Wanted to be part of progress, right? And I think we need to respect that part of the history. But the tile in this case was a very poor attempt at attracting tourists, but tourists are not fooled. They want a traditional architecture, they'll go to the old city.
Interesting. I mean, Katie's work is also at this kind of hybrid. There's a bit of cultural mashup going on in importing, you know, elements from different countries, bringing them to the UK. And we have a question here that has to do with, you know, changes. Are you interested in changing and influencing, transforming the bathing culture through these other ideas that, as you know, the way that Mikhail is describing his interest in impacting, offering more variety into the public bathing scene of a place? I mean, in some ways, we're dependent upon symbolic contagion, trade, exchange when we're doing that.
Hey, yeah, so I would say that it's really, what's the question exactly I'm answering, or am I just commenting?
So how the role of like contagion, influence, and transforming a scene, is that something that you're interested in doing with the projects that you're working on?
Completely. And I think actually it's kind of one of the aims of the British Sauna Society when we talk about the work and the future of the organisation. And yeah, and all the work that I've done, it's about influencing the culture and the growing culture in the UK, because we come from a very sort of a place where there's nothing really there. So we've got a lot of opportunity to do things. I mean, you sent me a question around nudity, for example, which is very similar to the North American, you know, we're very, and as Pia mentioned, you know, there's this kind of real difficulty with people about nudity in the UK. And I didn't even touch on that when I did the Beach Box project, because it was more important at that moment to get people in and get people experiencing and enjoying the experience. And, you know, so there's kind of levels to it. So as far as I'm concerned, we've got so much work to do, basically. What we're starting to do is get people into the spaces and enjoying the spaces. But yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
You bring up nudity. Many of the students' questions had to do with the challenges of comfort, being comfortable in your body in these spaces. And I can't. I'm going to try and just synthesize some of these because there were so many of them. But each of you was asked in different ways. You know, how do you deal with people who have different senses of comfort, depending on where you were raised and how you were raised, your sense of your own physical comfort. Do you have the right to be, you know, here in the first place? Does anybody want to pursue that a little bit more?
Maybe. Okay, so that's something we sort of like experience in our projects very much. Projects, we have like visitors from all over the world. You have on one side the Icelandic guest, which is very sort of like used and open to being naked among other same-sex groups. But then you have you know, other foreign visitors that come in and they're not used to that, and so it's very difficult for certain people to be exposed to others, precisely to, you know, with groups of people that, you know, like family members or friends or stuff like that. And so we have to incorporate in our projects very much try to accommodate the spaces for that, for this particular group of people to be able to.
Let's just say goodbye to Aziza. She has to go.
Goodbye, Aziza.
Bye.
Continue, Marcos.
And yeah, so apart from the sort of like, for example, talking about the changing rooms, that's where people come together, and you are obliged in Iceland to take a shower naked, fully naked. It's obligatory in order to enter the bathing area. So we have to incorporate like private, like one-person private changing rooms that accommodate these type of users. So I think, yeah, it's a very contrasting sort of the cultures that meet together in the bathing pools. And one way of dealing with that is by accommodated spaces for privacy.
Yeah, Yuma has something to say.
Yes, I just want to reflect on that question. I think from the point of view again of kind of how swimming and bathing can also transform aquatic space into a certain public space, especially in the urban context. And I think, so, you know, of course, especially because the swimming is taking place, bathing is taking place in the middle of the city, you do have a lot of different populations that come together, of course, with various different comfort levels, right? In terms of public nudity, etc. And I think also, I think another question is also the you know, a question about ability, like can you actually swim? And I think you know, are you in a position to swim? Do you feel safe swimming? There's I think one lesson I think that resonate with me while I was doing this research is the fact that kind of opening up the river, opening up a lake for swimming doesn't just benefit the people who are engaging in that activity, but also kind of there is a certain kind of, let's say, a benefit that emanates from this activity onto land, kind of onto the riverbanks, etc. You know, when you have people using the river, active in the river, then that naturally brings people to the river, and you know, and you can kind of engage in this activity without actually having, you can engage in this culture without having to swim, right, necessarily. You can sit on the riverbanks, you can watch the people swim past, you know, you could maybe, you could, yeah, you know, basically enjoy the time, enjoy the atmosphere, and I think, and enjoy kind of basically this active participation in civic life that I think comes with kind of going to the river, especially in the summer in Swiss cities. And so I think that, you know, on a very, very large scale, I think it kind of let's say incorporates or manifests, I think, kind of a certain lesson for how to design bathing spaces. So to design bathing spaces in a way that you don't necessarily have to be, you know, actively part of that activity in order to kind of somehow gain some enjoyment out of it. Right. So kind of having certain different levels of engagement possible.
Levels of engagement. I just want to turn that to Mikhail and ask, do you have comments on this? It has a bit to do with rules and comfort and culture, and you've been to so many places all over the world. Seeing how can we establish these, like, experimental, as we're building new kinds of facilities, we're reimagining these places for multicultural communities, for people all over the world, people with very different expectations. And do you have suggestions for how we can develop that?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a whole, I mean, you go to Germany, and if you go in a sauna with clothes on, you're kicked out. You know, and you go obviously in some of the Middle Eastern countries, and you know, it's the opposite. So, you know, you have this amazing variety of customs around to nude or not nude. And my position always has been, just get them in the bath. I don't care, you know, just get them in. If they're uncomfortable being naked, have them put a towel on, whatever. Just get them in the bath. But to answer, just to speak more to your question, how do you accommodate that? I think you just give options. You know, there's maybe different times where people can be without clothes. There's times when clothing is optional, when it's required. You could have separate bathing for men and women. There, you know, it's like it's a restaurant where you give people options, and you just have to be aware. And if you're rigid, and you can be rigid. You can, you know, there's no reason why you can't be rigid, but then you're really going to be only speaking to a subset of the general population. That's okay too. So I'm really all across the board on this. Just get them in the bath, period, whatever it takes. I want to say one thing while I have a chance to amplify something Pia said, because she's kind of blown my mind a little bit here with something she said that really has been very important to me right now. When I was working in the 70s in Finland, I had the opportunity to really get to know some people, and one person in particular, the president of the Finnish Sauna Society. And he was so adamant about the sauna is a place, you don't want to make the best sauna on the block, because there's a lot of talk about from architectures and architects to make these incredible saunas. And he said, wait, no, we want to get the block in the sauna. So he really kind of turned my head into that public bathing world that we're talking about now. But because of the pandemic, all my public baths here in San Francisco are closed. I have been the advocate for public bathing. I didn't put a sauna in my house because I had them build one into the swimming pool down the block. You know, I suddenly have no sauna. So, you know, I'm actually rethinking my whole attitude towards, you know, bathing these little cubicles. I'm ready to pop up. You know, I'll do anything to sweat right now. And what Pia's given me permission in a way. I'm not sure she understands what she's done, but because I'm the social guy and I want to be social, right? And now Pia has said, and I've already experienced this, I know exactly what she's talking about, because I do have a sauna in Norway at my house. And the last summer when I was there, all alone in my sauna, I was talking to my relatives. I was talking to my grandfather. I was talking to my father. I was not alone. And it was as communal and in a community based as anything I've done here in San Francisco at the banya, you know, or the sauna. Peter, thank you. You've given me permission to take a sauna alone and still be an advocate for communal bathing. Thank you.
Because you're bathing with your ancestors.
Absolutely.
It's very beautiful.
It was beautiful, Pia. Thank you.
Katie, did you have something you wanted to say a minute ago?
Oh, I was just going to make a little comment about the whole nudity thing. We were thinking of ways to introduce it to people, and one way we introduce everything to people is culturally. So, for example, we were thinking about doing German night where, you know, it's textile free. Or because in Finland, actually, you know, textile free public saunas is actually male and female segregated. And we started, you know, experimenting with that, doing women's saunas and things. Anyway, so that was just, I was thinking about, you know, ways to introduce it to people if you give it a cultural element rather than saying naked party and everyone, you know. no one knows what to expect.
I love there's so many interesting overlaps here that we're all going to be thinking of for a really long time. I'm also thinking about the contamination, the sharing, the porosity of the body that becomes highlighted. You know, when people think of fear of contagion and everything, and I'm also very interested in your practice, Marcos, where the buildings themselves are recognized to be extremely porous at many different levels, from the most, from the level of the piping, where you have to consider the material of the pipe, because the water is so active, certain pipes can be corroded by certain waters. So you're thinking, let's say electrochemically, you're thinking materially, you're thinking about contagion of materials and bodies, and it extends, it crosses that threshold human to non-human, right? In a way that many architects are not thinking about. They're not thinking that the surface that they are making for someone to lean against is now being absorbed into the skin of that person. And I think that that's one of the, if we talk about this 1% positives of the COVID, it does bring up some of these issues that Pia started to highlight on contagion, contamination, porosity that will never go away. We are not going to be able to stop that, right? Everything is migrating. Just wonder if you have any comment on that, Marcos, in terms of your practice.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and that's very true. When you talk about the corrosion of the materials and the sort of like the limited palette that you have in certain projects, according to how the qualities of the water affects the material in different ways. So, for example, in the Blue Lagoon, we have a water that has high levels of sulfur and silica that is very corrosive. So, for example, there is very few types of timber that we can use, for example, and we've done tests and learned through the years and sort of like come down to a very sort of special palette for this project that's that lasts and works well. And you have other projects in which the water is different, so you have a different set of materials. Yeah, I think it's interesting the sort of like the comparison you make about the porosity of the building and also the porosity of the human body, how it reacts differently to different types of water. I think it's very important relationship. So those are my thoughts on the question.
Does anybody else have a point? Katie had something. Yeah.
It was just a small comment about materials, because we use cheap materials, so we can do things cheaply and quickly and make it happen. So, like, for example, our large sauna was built out of old pallet wood and some salvaged, insulation. I just wanted to say that I that's something I've been thinking about, is the way we build things, making it happen rather than waiting for making it last forever. And also to do with microbes, we've actually, because we're in an urban environment next to a railway, we've actually got rats and foxes in our spa, so people have to deal with that. But no one seems to mind. It's just like it's part of it.
Amazing. Pia wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, maybe rats like sauna too. I was actually going to say that if you use cheap materials and you kind of don't have quality control, always, of course, untreated is better than treated, so it breathes. But then one key is also to leave the floor in a way accessing the earth. So even if you have a floor, it's a floor that has cracks simply, and that and the earth can breathe into the sauna.
Well, it's very interesting, because I didn't know, I did that with our big sauna. It's just laid on you've got sleepers around the edge to hold the walls, and then it's an earth foundation so there you go. That's why it's good. Okay. Cool.
And I mean, if you have rats, you won't stop them from coming into the sauna, even if you build a proper floor. They can eat through concrete, so you have to do something else with the rats. I was actually thinking, I don't know how much time, maybe we don't have any more time, but I was thinking about the question that I received that was maybe the most sort of difficult to answer, which was this: how can you? We talk about nudity, and this kind of gender-specific nudity, and how to encourage people to not worry about it, and and there's been a whole conversation on the chat here that I think relates to that. That really, I mean, the only way that you can kind of create safe spaces for mixed gender and multiple mixed gender, let me even emphasize that, is to first create the safe space in general for a sauna bathing practice or whatever practice. As an example, when I was running my public sauna at PS1, I was there for a year running. At some point, I did get a man come to the sauna who had probably read about it in the newspaper, and he behaved really well. He was a very, very smart man, and he went into the sauna, and when he came out, he had a huge erection, and he kind of posed it around. And there were always people photographing. So immediately the flashes go. And I'm like, okay, this is maybe the end of the sauna because, with the erection, if somebody publishes this image and there's a child in the same image, it's going to be child molestation. And we are all going to go to jail. But I basically, I tried not to I didn't pay attention to his erection. So he eventually had to even ask me, don't you think my erection is great? And I said, well, it's big. How about some cold water? But anyway, so I tried to sort of not get into the game. And I let him bathe. I let him leave. And then I spent some days thinking about what just happened. Because when I had started the sauna in such a public space as PS1, the courtyard of a New York museum, really wanted to make sure that this space is open. It's open for anyone. It's safe because I'm there constantly. I tell them how to do the sauna. I tell them what the temperatures are and, everything. I guide them through the process. Exactly. You are not an educated sauna person. Let me show you how. And also to accept whatever people need. Do they need to wear clothes or, I accept anyone, any kind of performance in the sauna. But when this guy came, something else happened. And I wasn't sure what it was and how to relate to it. But after 2 days of thinking about it, what had happened was that particular man had used his penis as a way to change the organization and the culture of the sauna. He transformed it to his sauna, his game, and it actually didn't allow for the sauna to exist anymore. It became a completely different thing. So this was when I decided, okay, this is where I do draw the line. And so when he came back a week later, thinking that he can do the same performance, I just said that I can't have him. And he understood and he left. But so I don't think that whatever we do, again, porosity and contagion, whatever we do, you can never be a purist about what happens in a sauna or in any kind of bathing culture. And so it's, again, this idea that you can only sort of let the culture foster that will create that safety. So there's a lot of people that have been talking about how you need to educate people. I guess educate could be a word. I probably would just really prefer to say that it's more like letting this culture to thrive and create that space that is needed.
Because the culture, when you say culture, you mean the collective too.
The collective
Also,
culture.
like the wisdom of the collective can do things. I mean,
Yeah.
we've kind of gone on a fair amount longer than I thought. Of course, I could stay here all day, but I don't mean to impose that on all of you. I can't thank you all enough for coming and sharing this. And also to all the participants, the many people. At one point I looked, there was more than 50 people here. All of you who came out today. Thank you so much for joining us as we explored these issues. You know, I think in the conversation we can see some possible directions forward for developing some of these future post-COVID bathing situations or eternally with COVID bathing cultures. I think that the inclusion of the acknowledging of porosity and contamination as part of our world is part of this moment. And bathing architecture is kind of, you know, we can expand this to understand the whole world, that we are always bathing with each other in different media. In the air that we breathe is now, you know, a viscous kind of medium that's transmitting all kinds of information. So the bathing architectures are highlighting that for us, and maybe we can use them to understand this moment as well too. So thank you again. Thank you so much to Aziza, who had to leave. Thank you, Pia. Thank you, Yuma and Marcus, Katie, and Mikhail. And I hope we can talk again too. And yeah, take care.